Millions of people suffer from food-related illnesses each year. The CDC estimates that out of 48 million cases, 38 million people didn't know what they ate that made them sick.
USA Today food and travel columnist Larry Olmsted is out with a book called Real Food, Fake Food. It exposes the ways Americans are scammed into buying and eating fraudulent food. And Larry joins us now here at the desk. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Let's start off with, what exactly are you talking about when it comes to fake food? What is that?
It's generally, I say it's when you don't get what you think you're buying, but an example would be if you order, say, lobster ravioli and it doesn't contain any lobster, which has been widely documented.
So in your book, you say, you're talking about lobster ravioli, you specifically cite the seafood industry. You say it's rampant with fraud. You use the analogy that if every time you pulled into a gas station and you thought you were filling your tank with gasoline, you were actually filling your tank with dirty water, which is pretty disgusting. That's exactly what the seafood industry is like. Yes,
it's very common in the seafood industry what they call species substitution, where you buy one fish and you get a less expensive species. At least if you buy a T-bone steak, it might not be grass-fed or the steak you thought you were buying, but you can tell it's a T-bone steak. When you buy seafood, often you really don't know what fish it is at all, and the substitutes are very undesirable.
But they call it red snapper. It says red snapper. Is it not red snapper? Is that not a species of fish?
Red snapper is a very desirable species of fish. It's delicious. That's why it's popular. It's also commercially fairly uncommon. So in studies where they buy samples at retail and at restaurants all over the country, test it, red snapper failed to be red snapper 94% of the time.
Wow.
And the substitute, which is called the most common substitute, tilefish, is so high in mercury it's on the FDA's do not eat list for pregnant women.
Wow.
Tilefish.
I thought it was fascinating. In your investigation, you discovered that consumers have a better chance of finding safer seafood at the bigger box stores, which I would have thought would have been just the opposite.
Yeah, a lot of people have been surprised by that, but I recommend looking. There's a few third-party organizations that certify the validity of seafood, the Marine Stewardship Council, the Global Aquaculture Alliance, and the big box stores are in a position to tell their distributors, as Walmart did, you have 5 years to get this certification or we're not going to buy from you anymore, and if you supply them, you're going to go get that certification.
So you also say that olive oil and honey, which are hugely popular food items, you say that they're commonly fake. Now, people accuse me of being a food snob because I will always say, well, I spent most of my life in France. I tend to buy, for example, in the case of olive oil, I buy olive oil that is imported from France because I know that in Europe the regulations are stricter as to what you can call a certain food versus here in the U.S. You say that olive oil and honey are also foods that are typically faked.
They absolutely are. I mean, 60 Minutes just earlier this year did a study of olive oil, and they estimated 80 to 85% of what's labeled extra virgin in this country is not. Experts vary. One German study put it at 97%. Wow. But I do, one of the places I recommend buying from in my book is Olivier and Company, which has a store here in Grand Central Station, and it's all from France.
Yeah.
So
Welcome back to Calculated Confusion Exposed. Today we are going to be covering fake food. From the news clip shown we can see there is a lot of deception behind fake food. GMOs and pesticides are riddled within our food and making us more susceptible to cancer and other diseases. Let's further investigate.
What are the goals of the genetically modified food industry?
The main reason they genetically engineer crops is to sell more chemicals. The Roundup Ready sells more Roundup, the Liberty Link sells more Liberty. Those are herbicides. And 85% of the GMOs in the world are herbicide tolerant, mostly Roundup Ready. There's also the second most common category are soy in South America, plus cotton and corn also in North America, that produce their own insecticide. So you actually eat the corn on the cob and you're eating an insecticide, and oftentimes it's that's called BT. Oftentimes it's not only BT corn, but it's Roundup Ready corn. So you're eating Roundup residues plus an insecticide plus the GMOs, and I wouldn't do it if I were you. So they claim that the reason is to feed the world, but if they were actually motivated by feeding the world, they'd never make those type of GMOs. In fact, the GMOs that they make don't increase average yield. Sometimes they lower yield, and they claim that it's supposed to increase yield, but it's varied. And agroecological practices can double yield in developing countries, even triple yield. especially even the staples. And so you have a situation where if you really wanted to feed the world, you'd have nothing to do with GMOs. And that was the conclusion made by the ISTAD report, which was produced in 2008 with over 400 scientists, commissioned by the UN and the World Bank. It's the most comprehensive evaluation of how to feed the world. And their conclusion was GMOs have nothing to offer.
Are there any studies or research showing the health dangers from GMOs?
Yes, I collect them. I trade them with my friends. It's like baseball cards for me. Yeah, there's a lot. They show potentially precancerous cell growth in the digestive tract, smaller brains, livers, and testicles, partial atrophy of the liver, damaged immune system. That was one study in 1990s. Then there was things that show higher mortality, problems with the liver, problems with the kidneys, problem with the organ enzymes, altered biochemistry, damaged young sperm cells, damaged reproductive organs. We see problems of reproduction, birth defects. It goes on and on. And some of them repeat the same thing: immune system problems, digestive problems, reproductive problems, accelerated aging. And some of these were cited by the American Academy of Environmental Medicine in their paper that said all doctors should prescribe non-GMO diets to all patients. And when they started to, they reported to me that their patients were getting better. Now there's thousands of doctors prescribing organic diets and reporting dramatic improvements. Some of them are in the film, Secret Ingredients.
You said the most in-depth research study to date on GMO health showed massive damage. Tell us about the study and what did the biotech industry do to get people not to believe the study?
Well, there's two in-depth studies that I've talked about. One was from Dr. Arpad Pusztai from 1998. He went on TV answering some questions and saying that he didn't think that the public should be used as guinea pigs for an experiment on GMOs, and that he wouldn't put them in his mouth. Why? Because he had done the most sophisticated studies on GMOs and found out that the process itself, irrespective of what gene you put in, the mere process of genetic engineering caused all these problems: potentially precancerous cell growth in the digestive tract, smaller brains, livers, and testicles, partial atrophy of the liver, damaged immune system in 10 days. Now, he was fired from his job after 35 years and silenced with threats of a lawsuit. We understand that it was Monsanto that called the Clinton White House. Clinton called Tony Blair. The Prime Minister's office called Professor Philip James, who was Dr. Arpad Pusztai's boss, and the next day Pusztai was fired. And they put out a massive disinformation campaign to try and destroy his reputation in order to protect the reputation of biotechnology. Eventually he was invited to speak before Parliament. The gag order was lifted. He got his data back. It's published in The Lancet and other places, and it shows that the process of genetic engineering is unsafe. But by the time that came out, there was such confusion and such misreporting that it didn't have its day in court, so to speak. Similarly, Dr. G.E. Seralini, Professor Seralini, did a 2-year study on rats. He showed that Roundup Ready corn and Roundup, individually or together, caused multiple massive tumors, early death, and organ damage. It was the most comprehensive study, the longest study. It could have and should have stopped the use of GMOs around the world. Instead, this massive disinformation campaign used its own campaign as an echo chamber, claiming it was consensus and it was just their own paid people and pseudoscientists and front groups saying the same talking points that were distributed by Monsanto's PR firm. And that ended up causing doubt among both the regulators around the world and those that were reporting on it. And so Dr. Seralini was eventually awarded an award for being a whistleblower. His stuff was published and vindicated, but it did not have the impact that it should have had, again, because of the massive attack campaign that is regularly unleashed on any scientist who dares to discover problems.
You said that over 90% of the soy, corn, cotton, canola, and sugar beet crops in the U.S. are GMO. Why is such a high percentage of these crops GMO, and why is that a problem?
It's interesting that Monsanto, before they were purchased by Bayer, went on a shopping spree themselves and bought up all these seed companies and created motivation for the seed dealers to sell the GMO version. They sometimes eliminated the best performing non-GMO version, so you could only buy the GMO version. There was all sorts of economic incentives and elimination of alternatives to push these out. And all of the crops that you mentioned are Roundup Ready, which makes it easier to weed. So if you have a large farm, you could weed without the farmers by just running a tractor or flying a plane and spraying right over the top. So you don't have to spot apply. You can just broad scale spread your poison all around. It gets absorbed into the food. We eat it if we eat the GMOs. So it's easier to weed. It makes farming easier, less time consuming, less labor costs. And in some cases, you have trouble getting non-GMO seed that does well in your area. Right now, you can't get a non-GMO sugar beet seed. You can't get sugar beets. They're all GMO, 100%. In some areas, I talk to farmers in their area, they can't get high-performing non-GMO seeds. It's been taken over.
Like me and you have a child with allergies, every day can be a challenge.
But did you know food allergies in kids are now on the rise? And scientists are trying to figure out exactly why. Here's Lauren Tallarico.
It's peanut butter jelly time. Where you at? Where you at?
Growing up, PB&J's may have been the token lunch at your school, but today you'd be hard-pressed to find a school that allows peanuts anywhere on campus. What's the deal? Are we all just paranoid now about food allergies? The answer, as Dr. Eric Sandberg with Kelsey-Seybold explains, is no.
All the data indicates that the number of food allergies in children has been rising actually for many years. And it's been a big question of why that really happens.
The CDC says since 1997, food allergies in kids has spiked more than 50%, with numbers tripling when it comes to peanut or tree nut allergies. We are talking 5.6 million kids with a food allergy. That's 1 in 13. Why? Well, right now, there are just theories.
One idea that's gotten a lot of traction is that we live in a cleaner society. And so because of that cleanliness, we have less infections, which is a good thing. But it may skew our immune system to develop some of these food allergies.
A new report found popular breakfast foods and cereals marketed to kids contain a weed-killing chemical that some health authorities link to cancer.
This is so bizarre to me, but the research that came out this morning discovered trace amounts of something called glyphosate that are in oats and granola and snack bars. Anna Warner has more on what you should know.
We're very concerned that consumers are eating more glyphosate than they know.
Scott Faber has been working to improve food safety standards for more than a decade. He says the team at the Nonprofit Environmental Working Group, or EWG, had a lab test 45 samples of products made with conventionally grown oats and found glyphosate, the active ingredient in the Monsanto weed killer Roundup, in all but 2.
I was shocked.
Dr. Jennifer Lowry heads the Council on Environmental Health for the American Academy of Pediatrics.
We don't know a lot about the effects of glyphosate on children, and essentially we're just throwing it at them.
EWG used its own, more stringent standards to conclude that products with excessive levels of the herbicide included Quaker Old-Fashioned Oats, Cheerios, Quaker Dinosaur Egg Instant Oats, Great Value Instant Oats, and Back to Nature Classic Granola Clusters. Glyphosate was even found in a few organic products, though most had non-detectable levels. The World Health Organization says glyphosate is a probable carcinogen. The state of California lists it as a chemical known to the state to cause cancer. Monsanto disputes that, saying in a statement glyphosate does not cause cancer and has a more than 40-year history of safe use. And Monsanto criticized EWG's research, saying even at the highest level reported, an adult would have to eat 118 pounds of the food item every day for the rest of their life in order to reach the EPA's limit for glyphosate residues.
Did Monsanto fail to adequately warn of the potential risks? Answer, yes.
But last week, a jury in California ordered Monsanto to pay one man $289 million in damages after he claimed the company's glyphosate weed killers caused his cancer. And EWG's Faber is skeptical of EPA's glyphosate limits.
We don't think it does enough in particular to protect children.
It is time now for them to step up and do their jobs to ban glyphosate.
Zen Honeycutt heads Moms Across America, a group formed to raise awareness about toxic exposures. Her family switched to an organic-only diet after her 3 sons developed allergies and other health problems.
We want to trust that what is in the grocery store is safe. And the shocking reality is that in many cases it's not.
We reached out to the manufacturers of those products. In a statement, Quaker said, "We proudly stand by the safety and quality of our Quaker products. Any levels of glyphosate that may remain are significantly below any limits of the safety standards set by the EPA and the European Commission as safe for human consumption." And General Mills told us our products are safe and without question, they meet regulatory safety levels. The EPA has researched this issue and has set rules that we follow. Anna Werner, CBS News.
Over the past decades, the rate of cancer has been rising around the world, with a heavy focus in the developed world. It's no secret. It's estimated that half of the people who are alive in 2019 will be affected by cancer at some point in their lives, and this number is projected to only increase in the future.
These clips all explain the issues with GMOs and pesticides and how it has affected society over time with increased food allergies and significantly higher cases of cancer. Our body was not meant to consume genetically modified foods. Another major issue with food today are with the health alternatives. You have to be careful even for the foods that are deemed to be healthy because that is not always the case.
Many people have the completely wrong impression of what Whole Foods sells. They think Whole Foods sells products that are entirely non-GMO, products that are clean, that don't have heavy metals, that don't have pesticides, that don't have glyphosate or herbicides. That is completely false. Whole Foods Market all across the country sells products to its customers that contain heavy metals, that contain glyphosate, pesticides, herbicides, and GMOs. The company has created a false impression where many of their customers think that they don't sell any GMOs or they don't sell anything artificial. They've got a sign out on their store in North Austin that says nothing artificial ever. And then inside the store, things that they sell are artificial, including genetically modified organisms that are part of many products on the shelves at Whole Foods. So this claim that they have nothing artificial ever, it's a fraudulent claim. And much of the marketing of Whole Foods to its customers is really just greenwashing. It's invoking the terminology and the keywords and the concepts that appeal to health-conscious consumers without actually making good on those assertions and promises. Whole Foods is a very deceptive company. Even the name Whole Foods is deeply deceiving to its customers because much of what it sells isn't a whole food. It's really a processed food, or it's a genetically modified food, or it's a food that's grown in China with toxic heavy metals in it. I have personally purchased foods at Whole Foods, and I've tested them in my laboratory, and I've seen all of these things in those foods. I've seen the heavy metals, I've seen the glyphosate, I've seen the pesticides, I've seen the herbicides, and I haven't even begun looking for things like hormone disruptors yet. No doubt we'll find many of those things as well. As a forensic food scientist, I'm the lab science director of CWC Labs. I'm the author of the #1 best-selling science book on Amazon.com called Food Forensics. I know for a fact that much of what Whole Foods sells at a very high price is no different from foods that are sold at regular grocery stores. They come from, in many cases, the exact same suppliers. They're made with the same ingredients. They contain the same GMOs, they contain the same herbicides and pesticides. They're no different except that sometimes they're 50% higher cost. So what Whole Foods is really creating for its customers is an illusion. It's a shopping experience, the illusion of living a healthy lifestyle and having the ambiance, if you will, of an inviting store atmosphere. It's the illusion of eating healthy, when much of what Whole Foods sells is really not healthy, in my opinion, as a nutritionist, as a scientist, as an author. Much of what Whole Foods sells, in my opinion, contributes to cancer, contributes to diabetes, contributes to heart disease. and Alzheimer's and dementia and kidney disorders. And they don't seem to be very concerned about that.
At Whole Foods Market, values matter. So the fresh fruits and vegetables we sell support organic and sustainable farming.
Whole Foods is a public company, and they are driven by profit more than ethics or morals. They're willing to hop on the bandwagon of healthy living and healthy food and create the impression, if you will, that they can weave a tapestry for their customers, but they're not really willing to make good on that in many ways. For example, I met with a Whole Foods executive a couple of years ago, and I presented to her the evidence that they were selling products on their shelves right out of the store in Austin, Texas, that contained really alarming levels of lead and cadmium and mercury. And they took that information, we had a discussion, I laid it out, I said this is a public health issue, this is a corporate integrity issue. And over the last 2 years, Whole Foods has done absolutely nothing about that. Right now, Whole Foods continues to sell products that they know are contaminated with lead, that they know contain glyphosate and pesticides, that they know are unlabeled GMOs.
20 to 30% of Whole Foods products contain GMO ingredients, depending on each store or region. Genetically engineered foods are everywhere, in the salad bar, packaged foods, meats, and dairy products, yet we are not informed of each product because there are hundreds of genetically engineered ingredients.
And now to see Whole Foods really betray the organic movement by, in essence, partnering with Monsanto to push this anti-GMO labeling bill through the US Senate, it's, in many people's minds, it's the ultimate betrayal. Whole Foods, people thought, was a place that cared about them, that cared about their health, that cared about honest labeling and transparency and corporate responsibility, because that's what they espouse, that's what they claim to offer. But when you really scrutinize their actions, they betray those values and they betray their customers. And as a result, more and more people are saying they're not interested in shopping at Whole Foods. They don't want to reward a corporation that is being so dishonest with them, a corporation that's actually promoting the interests of Monsanto, that is dividing and causing an internal civil war, in fact, in the organic industry.
Back to Daybreak this morning. For years now, we've been hearing about companies looking for a cheap and a tasty way to swap meat for plants. Now there's a meatless alternative that's making some headway, cracking into the fast food industry with the Impossible Burger.
The Whopper. News 8's Justin Kolar's in studio. We just have to ask, Justin, was the burger worth the bite?
Teresa and Casey, we put the Impossible Whopper to the taste test, and it actually tasted pretty good. But we also put it under the microscope, talking to a local nutritionist to see if the switch makes sense from a health standpoint. By now, you've likely seen the ads. Impossible Burgers, promoting meatless alternatives. But are they good for you?
For health reasons, no, they're not. They don't have the health halo that people think they should have.
That's Dr. Christy Arts, a nutritionist for Spectrum. She claims the proof is in the patty.
People hear that they're plant-based alternatives to meat products, so they think they may be healthier. But in fact, when you look at the ingredient list, they're typically high in saturated fat, high in sodium, and they're really just a processed food.
According to Burger King's nutrition website, one thing their 100% meatless Whopper has going for it is 80 milligrams less cholesterol than its meaty counterpart. However, it does have 10% more sodium and nearly 20% more carbs.
It can be a nice transition product, potentially. I would say that's the only real advantage I see as a physician.
So we
A new study reveals a chemical that can be harmful to your health is found in water in 43 states. The Environmental Working Group says PFAs, which are chemicals used in consumer products like firefighting foam and non-stick cookware, can be found in 610 locations across the country, and that includes drinking water for about 19 million people. For more on this now, we're joined by David Andrews, a senior scientist for the Environmental Working Group. So I read sort of the article on this report, and it is scary because we're talking about a problem basically across the country. David, how significant are the results of this study?
Well, this should be frightening to all Americans in many ways. Because these chemicals, these are the Teflon or Scotch gutter chemicals, as you mentioned, they're common in firefighting foam. They're stain repellent, but they don't break down in the body, and they don't break down in the environment, and they actually stick to our blood. So levels tend to increase over time.
So then, are we seeing levels within our bodies? Are we finding children with this stuff in them? And how could it potentially affect our health? How is it affecting our health?
Right. These chemicals are actually found in everyone in the United States, just about everyone in the entire world. And exposure to these chemicals really can impact a lot of different health systems, cause numerous health harms, everything from testicular to kidney cancer, harm to the liver, harm to the thyroid. It actually impacts childhood development, low birth weight, and it actually can impact the immune system.
Before we go, we are just going to take a look at a few GMO and plastic fake foods that many people eat on a daily basis.
Mọi người xem này, hôm nay mình mua từng này, cả tan xa xèo này.
자, 영희 그야. We analyze the different components that make those beautiful cuts and try to figure out which are the key components that we need to mimic in order to achieve those beautiful cuts of meat. We identified 3 main components: the muscle, the blood, and the fat. These are the components that we need to mimic in order to reach the perfect, beautiful steak.
Hey family, welcome back to the News, Knowledge, and Life channel with your man King Williams with another informative video for you. Definitely got to jump right into it, and I want to talk about Michigan bans many stores from selling seeds, home gardening supplies, calls them not necessary. You want to know why they call it not necessary, family? They call it not necessary because they want to force you to eat GMO food that doesn't hold nutritional values. And if you notice at some of your markets and some of your stores where you might buy fruits and vegetables, none of it have seeds in it. Like some of you might go buy oranges. You know, you buy these oranges, they don't have seeds up in it.